We're moving on to the troublemakers, the wrestling teams. But first, they have asked me to recognize the cheerleaders from the Fruitport Trojan wrestling teams that were there for so many years to cheer them on. So if we can have some of the ladies who I know are here tonight from the Trojan wrestling team stand up, and let's give them a round of applause for all that they've done for these teams. Thank you, ladies. The Fruitport Wrestling Dynasty lasted from 1968 to 1978. During that period, the Trojans amassed over 100 victories, dozens of tournament championships, 10 consecutive Seaway Conference championships, and 8 straight years of being ranked in the state's top 10. These teams were an inspiration to the school and community and continue to be to this day. Here's more on the Trojan Wrestling Dynasty.
I got lucky enough to be on a team with a whole bunch of good wrestlers, and they carried me here.
We were a good group of athletes, and Harrington is really the focal point of that. He put us on the map as a wrestling power. So
the kids got a lot of compliments in terms of not only their athletic prowess, but their sportsmanship. What certainly made me proud, being their leader. And we actually, the kids put wrestling on the map of Michigan's, Fruitport was the hotbed of wrestling. And it really helped that it helped, there was a lot of good wrestling in the area. Orchard View, Muskegon, Mona Shores, we had some really top-notch wrestlers there. And wrestling heretofore had been dominated by the eastern part of the state, and I think we kind of leveled the field in those 5 years.
Alan Lee and Pat Harrington tricked me into getting on the team. It was a good trick, though. They got me out of English class and got me a free physical. That was my conditions. Yeah, I didn't know they were going to do it that quick.
It was nice winning all those tournaments and all those matches and being the big guys on the block as far as wrestling in our conference. It was
Fruitport, out of 12 weight classes, we had 11 finalists in the conference. I thought that was pretty neat.
Well, I think my fondest memory is when we faced Shelby, and I think it was in 1972, when they had a national winning streak that drew the attention of Sports Illustrated. And they had representatives here filming and interviewing people, and we beat their national record winning streak that night, which was incredible.
I think my biggest win was against Fremont in the Seaway Conference Finals my sophomore year against Ken Abbott. He was an undefeated senior. He probably beat me 5 or 6 times, and I finally got him back.
In my junior year, I think it was my junior year, must have been, we lost to Fremont in a dual meet. And we didn't lose many dual meets. So that was the first time we met Fremont. So later in that year, we're going to wrestle Fremont again. I decided on my own that instead of wrestling at 137, I would drop down to 130, meaning I had to lose weight to get there. He says, "Oh, man, that's great." So he adjusts the lineup and we wrestle Fremont. And we had an awesome outing. With me going down a weight class, it meant that he had a stronger lineup. But I had to tell the coach that I starved myself to death and I can't stay at that weight. It's a one-time thing. Revenge for Fremont.
It was tough making weight. You had to watch it. I ate a lot of green beans back then. The rest of the family would sit down to meat and potatoes and all that good stuff. I had a can of green beans.
Rick Brandenburg was wrestling the great went on to be a collegiate All-American, Tim McDonald of Fremont. Two fantastic competitors going at it, hammer and tongs, and in the third period, Brandenburg, being the brilliant wrestler he was up by 4 points over McDonald with about 30 seconds left when McDonald, lifting him up, drove him off the mat. His head hit the gym floor. Nowadays, that match would have been stopped because Rick clearly didn't know where he was. But they went back out to the middle of the mat and they were still both up. The ref blew the whistle. McDonald drove again, picked Brandenburg up, slammed him down on his back. The ref's counting back points. So we're sitting, oh, Rick's either going to get pinned, or if he survives, this is going to be a 5-point thing and he's going to lose by 1. Well, lo and behold, he arches his back, takes McDonald up all the way over onto his back, gets all of those points back. McDonald's the one on his back. Buzzer rings, the ref gives Brandenburg his back points. Brandenburg wins by 1 point. They shake hands. Brandenburg, raises his hand in victory and then smiles and sits down right in the middle of the mat with all of these thousands of people looking at it. So we go out there to see. He said, Rick, are you okay? He said, did I win? He said, did I get pinned? What happened? He didn't even know. He had sustained a concussion and he won anyway.
Probably the only one of the things that I think that was tougher than the practice that I remember is standing here right now and deflecting this glare off Greg's head. This is like pure torture. Can we like rotate around, like every couple of minutes, move down one? Because I'm getting like a sunburn right now. So, oh man, this is bad.
You're lucky I love you.
So we're going to do this a little bit different. We need all the wrestlers to come on up here and please gather on the right side. And now we're going to welcome Bob Gustafson to speak on behalf of the first team, the 69-70s team. So please welcome the wrestlers.
I guess we're ready. First, again, I want to thank the cheerleaders. I think that was a new thing back in 1967, 68, to have cheerleaders for the wrestling team. You know, you had it for basketball and football and all of that, but not for wrestling. And so we really appreciate them. Second, the class of 70 was the first class that had Pat Harrington for the 4 years. That was his first year. For the first 4 years. Our wrestling team became a dynasty, but it was all built on the class of 66, 67, 68. None of us were individuals the best by ourselves. It was really all team effort. It's unfortunate that more of the class of 70 isn't here. I think we have 4 of us. We appreciate this honor. I'm actually lived on a street in Muskegon, and at the end of the street you could go to Mona Shores. About a half a block over you could go to Muskegon. My street, you could choose to go to any of them, and I got fortunate enough to choose Fruitport and my parents could not have made a better decision. Great school. I'm not going to get into Pat Harrington too much. He is the whole foundation of the Fruitport Wrestling Dynasty. We just want to thank you. It was great 4 years and yeah, great teammates.
We're going to start with the members of the 69-70 team. And if you could accept your award, Gordy Lee. Tom Best, Bob Gustafson, and Joe Pringle. And now to speak on behalf of the 70-71 team, please welcome Steve Hammond.
It's such an honor, of all people, to speak for all of these great guys. I was the worst wrestler Fruitport ever had, by a mile, but they put me up here because I talk. So that's why I'm here. I thought I'd just divide my little talk into three segments, because I'm supposed to talk about primarily the 1971 team, a few team highlights, but I would like to give you a little flavor as to why these guys were so great. And then I would like to tell a couple of quick little stories from specifically 1971. That team, of course, went 16-0. There were 150 Class B schools in Michigan that year. There were 4 of them from this area that were ranked in the top 10. 3 besides us. There's Fremont. Muskegon Catholic Central had the greatest team they ever had that year. And Orchard View, more than half the year, was rated number 1, and then we were. In addition to that, there's the perennial power Mona Shores. So for our team to go undefeated, it was pretty impressive. Like I say, Orchard View was number 1 for over half the season, but after we beat them both times we faced them and then beat them in 3 straight tournaments, they finally had to rate us above them. In addition, the team won the Shelby Invitational Championship, the Wyoming Park Invitational Championship, the Holland Invitational Championship, won the Tournament of Champions. The Tournament of Champions was an elite tournament where only conference champion schools were even allowed to compete. It's where state champions went to get beat. And loaded with Class A powers like Granville and stuff, Fruitport won that, walked away with that. District champions, of course, conference champions, regional champions. But that doesn't give the story. There's a lot of teams all over the country, high school teams that were great and had great records. I saw a movie about a baseball team in Iowa. They won 10 consecutive state baseball championships. It's not it. It's how you did it. It's what happened. And of course, wrestling is the toughest of all sports because you've got to have the cardiovascular thing of sports like cross country, track, swimming, combined with the physical punishment of football. But even that doesn't do it, because then there is the mental and the psychological pressure, because you're out there all by yourself. And sometimes the people you're facing, it's like you're out there with a mutant or something. You just, it can get pretty scary out there. So, some of the things over the years that stick out, of course, when, as Carl mentioned on the thing when we beat Shelby and broke their 42-match win streak. And during that match, our great champion, Tim Baker, was pinning a 2-time state champion from Shelby, Larry Seguin. And during that match, you guys all remember this, Larry Seguin's mother came out of the stands to save her boy. I'm not making this up. She took her shoe off and she's beating the referee over they're out of bounds, they're out of bounds. And the referee's going like this. And, things like moments when Russ Swanson at the state tournament down in Western Michigan Fieldhouse, and there's announced paid attendance of 12,000 people there, 16 matches, hundreds of wrestlers, and Russ Swanson records a pin and they stop the whole thing. It's Russ Swanson from Fruitport has just beaten the United States career pin record with 93 pins in that moment of all that fraternity, a roar of a salute to our guy from, champion from Fruitport, Rick Brandenburg. You've heard about him, the time that we had to put him up from 155 to 185 against a 38 match winner from Mona Shores. And the only way we could beat him is if he pinned the guy. So the guy was stalling. You saw the spectacle of a guy stalling and running from a wrestler half his size, and Brandenburg, to shame him into wrestling, turned his back like this, like a matador does with a bull. You don't see stuff like this. That's what these guys do, things like that. When Canada, the Canadian All-Star team came against Fruitport, mismatch. Canada never had a chance. These guys had their credentials: Montreal City champion, Quebec provincial champion, Ontario champion. They were led by the great John Gardner, the best high school wrestler in Canada, ranked 4th in the world, and John Traxler took him to the limit and almost pinned him. It was something to see, but the final score was Fruitport 36, Canada 12. Folks, in the 10 years of that dynasty, this wrestling team whenever they had their full team on the mat during that 10 period of time, no one ever beat them. Mark Lee winning the Tournament of Champions and not being able to stand up because he finished the match on 2 sprained ankles. And his brother and I had to carry him to the victor stand, and the guy that he beat collapsed onto the gym floor. Bob Dalrymple, when he pinned the giant behemoth Steve Ballenbach from Reese Puffer, and he was getting killed. He was behind 12-0. It was like a man trying to wrestle a grizzly bear, and he just kept coming back, and he wouldn't give up. And he had this great guy, huge guy on his back, but he had the hold in wrong. And the time was running out, and I remember thinking, will the hold slip? Will time run out on Dalrymple? Just as the ref, that split second as the ref's gonna go throw the towel, he calls the pin. We all explode, and both wrestlers collapse. They're down. They gave absolutely everything they have. You don't see this kind of stuff. Larger than life stuff. The legendary time when Fruitport was going to face the undefeated Shelby Tigers, and the legend when all the wrestlers in the darkened locker room before they went out all sang the last stanza of American Pie together. And then they went out and beat the undefeated 2-time state champions in a match that went down to the last desperate inch. The effort, the almost superhuman things that these guys did. And I haven't told you any of these stories. I just touched on them. Now I'm going to tell you 2 quick stories from 1971. And I don't care if I embarrass anybody or not. One was Ken Wilson, which I called the grudge match. Ken Wilson was putting together an epic season, winning one championship after another for Fruitport. One of the local radio stations, I can't remember the call letters, but named Ken Wilson as the greatest high school wrestler in all West Michigan. He was being heralded. Undefeated, goes all the way up, and this is in 1971, goes to conference, and of course Orchard View was loaded, and they had their own superstar by the name of Gary Tyndall, who was extremely tough, extremely cocky, and he went around and said loudly and longly all day that he was going to be the man to beat Ken Wilson. And he didn't care who knew it. He wanted his teammates to say it. It was a psychological ploy. That's what he was planning. So they get out in the finals, and they're both looking daggers at each other. You know, they're going up there and they're standing there, you know, and they're getting ready to, you know, to blow the whistle. And It didn't work. It just made Ken Wilson mad. And when the ref blew the whistle, Kenny shot in on him. He took him down, and then Ken Wilson had a way he could body slam people and do it legally. He knew how to do it. He was so good, he would lift it way up. And the thing that stood out is because championship matches, there was probably about 10, 11, 1,200 people in the gym that night. Championship matches are usually loud. This one, there was almost a hush. It was the quietest one that I'd ever seen, and it was because everybody there was aware of what Gary Tyndall had been saying, and they knew they were witnessing a grudge match. And they were all looking, you could almost hear the wrestlers breathe sometimes. And Ken took him down, jammed his face in the mat, and every time he stood up, he would lift him right up in the air and he'd slam him down. You could hear the bam. And he could do it because he had a neck. His knee would touch a split second before the guy hit. Then it's legal. He did that to me once in practice. I almost lost consciousness. Because if he did it to you in a parking lot, he'd hurt somebody. So every time, Tyndall kept trying to get up and it was bam, and the crowd would go, oh, bam, whoo, bam. So the final score was 8-1, but that doesn't do justice to the beating Tyndall took, and he never mouthed off again. The last story, Ali Frazier's got nothing on Tim Baker versus Roger West. To set the stage, Roger West was a two-time state champion. How many mere state champions were beaten by these guys? Two-time state champion from South Haven, a magnificent African-American boy, just, great, superb physique. His arms, it was like softball-sized biceps. And he was extremely intimidating. And just to let you know, at the Tournament of Champions, Roger West, what he would do, he would underhook his opponent. He would just get them, they were all petrified of him. He'd get a hold of them, and then he'd throw them back, and their whole body would fly up in the air, and he'd suplex them. Bam! Down they go, and he'd pin, and he'd get up, and he'd go like this. He'd always go like that. He was just awesome. He was considered unbeatable by the whole wrestling fraternity in Michigan. At the Tournament of Champions, his first opponent suffered a broken arm. Roger West's second opponent suffered a cracked vertebrae in his back, and our guy, Tim Baker, got off lucky. He got off with a concussion because Tim went to lock up with him, and the first time Tim hit a headlock and threw him on his back, but it was off the mat, unfortunately for Tim. The second time they came together again and he got hit, and Tim went down. He was almost out cold. West jumped on him and pinned him. That sets the stage. They both go on. Regional finals comes up later in the year. Alma, Michigan, 4,000 people there at Alma, about 35, 40 schools represented. Even the great Chris Taylor was there, the bronze Olympic medalist. There were all kinds of people. And the announcer had a flair for the dramatic. They come up there and the announcer says, Roger West is the two-time Michigan State champion and has won 99 consecutive matches. He is going for his 100th consecutive victory. Tim Baker has lost once. All the audience is murmuring it. So they come out, and the ref blows the whistle, and Roger West goes, into his stance. He would just stoned, and Tim Baker would just, with this, but Tim went right at him, and it caught Roger West off guard because he was not used to people attacking him. And Tim Baker went right after him like he was a steak. He shot in on Roger West, and he got him on the seat of his pants, and Roger West is looking wide-eyed. He's not used to people attacking him, and Baker gets the takedown, and then whoop, he puts him right on his back, and now the guy's really wide-eyed, and we're all going crazy. And this was not a grudge match. Every time they went off the mat, they were patting each other on the back. But Tim Baker beat the unbeatable 11-2 that night for Fruitport. It was one of the most glorious accomplishments that any Fruitport athlete has ever done or ever will do. But it was really something to see. These guys are something to see. Just in closing, I, like Mr. Scudder, I believe everything happens for a reason. I'm a Christian. I think everything happens for a reason. And I want you guys to know that those great virtues and the things that you showed back there at that time, it wasn't just for them. I think it was meant that we all meet again here, and these virtues that we learned that got us through this life, it is my prayer that all of us either have or will have their peace with God, and the virtues of the Fruitport Wrestling Dynasty will go on for eternity. And just to quote that coach from the movie Hoosiers, I love you guys. God bless every one of you.
I think they picked the right guy to tell the stories. From the 1970-71 team, Wayne Batch. Mike Beecham.
Everybody else do a duck walk.
Mike Beecham. Oh. Dave Best. Robert Coles. Rob Dalrymple. Gary Dill. Ken Green. Steve Hammond. Robert Haynes. Bruce Howerda. Gary Jolman. John Jolman. Charles Justian. Dale Kirsting. Don Kotecki. Alan Lee. Dennis Niebarger. Greg Pressler. Randy Reed. Stephen Rose. Steve Falkowski. Paul Schultz. Eugene Steeman. John Stanford. John Stanley. Carl Thompson. Jim Vanderlaan. Ken Wilson. And last but not least, Rocky Ibarra. How about a big round of applause for all of our wrestlers? And there will be time for pictures afterwards, so we can get the teams together again, if they're not swapping stories.